Rescue the Fosters is about changing the foster system. We want to ensure every child has a safe environment to grow and become healthy, successful adults.
Additionally, when I was in the foster care system, I had to defend for myself. Rescue the Foster is here to empower the youth aging out of the system and offer resources to ensure they are not dependent on the government.
What we observed was that children become institutionalized and end up in prison and providing the government with more funds.
Rescue the Foster will provide coaching, resume writing, interview skills, professional attire for interviews, budgeting, applying for college, and obtaining housing.
We want these youth to live the most freeing, successful life possible.
It is their right and our responsibility to ensure that our future kids and grandchildren can live happy lives.
Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord.
Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future.
Good evening and welcome to Rescue the Fosters. I am Gino, and next to me, as always, the co-founder and co-host of Rescue the Fosters, Miss Sylvia Beachy. Sylvia, how are you tonight?
I'm good, Gino. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for asking. Another great guest coming on tonight to tell her story. Boy, I don't know. If you've been watching this show for any length of time and you're not getting the drift yet, I don't know what else to tell you, but this is real. It's burgeoning. It's happening all throughout this country. Technically, it's happening across the world, but we focus mostly on America here. And it's got to stop. It's human trafficking, and it needs to stop. So, Sylvia, if you could please introduce our guest for tonight.
Yes, I would love to introduce Lakievia. Lakievia Lucky Johnson is a foster care alumni, non-custodial parent, and trafficking survivor. Born in Augusta, Georgia, Lakievia initially entered the foster care system at the age of 11. After being returned to family for a brief period of time, she would end up back in the foster care system at the age of 14 and would remain there until she aged out at the age of 18. While in a foster home at the age of 16, Lakievia was sold for sex by the foster parent she was living with at the time. Because of safety issues, Lakievia did not report the assault until after she turned 18 years old. Even then, however, her police reports were swept under the rug. She was shamed. The benefits she received as a foster care alumni and college student in the state of Georgia were stripped from her. And after reporting the assault to a judge during a post-divorce custody dispute in 2019, custody of her children were taken from her, given to a third party, and she was banned from seeing them and speaking to her two daughters.
Well, Lakievia, thank you so much for joining us in Rescue the Fosters tonight. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I really love the mission of Rescue the Fosters, and excuse me if I get teary because just listening to that just like breaks my heart, honestly.
Yes.
Well, that's understandable. Very understandable. So, Lakievia, how did this all start? I mean, do you want to go back to your childhood and when you were put in foster care? Do you want to start there? Or
Yeah, we can. So growing up, I really had grew up in a good household for the most part. My mom actually was a social worker herself. She started an organization called Safe Zone, which helped latchkey children. That's what they were called in those days in the early 90s. Children who would come home from school without parents there. She had a nonprofit organization to support them. And so I grew up in a household under a social worker who actually was, very similar to Sylvia, really committed to the children. Unbeknownst to me, unfortunately, my mom contracted HIV, as a kid during that epidemic time. And over the years, that really turned into AIDS. And so my mom was given 6 months to live when I was about 11 years old. And she was given 6 months to live. When she was given 6 months to live, we, tried to stay with my grandmother, her mom, for a little while. That didn't necessarily work out. And so my brother, my sister, and I'm the oldest living, they're younger. We went into the foster care system. My mom and my dad were divorced. So about 3 months later, my dad came and got us out of the foster care system. Unfortunately, part of the reason why they're divorced is because my dad was what people would call a rolling stone. He loved us, but he had his own life too, drugs, alcohol, that kind of was what he was really into. And so we didn't stay with him that long before we kind of, ended up back in the foster care system after, trying to like live with him and some other families. And he just wasn't able to like really take care of us. So we ended up back into the foster care system. My mom actually, after having been only given 6 months to live, she lived like for over a decade. So she got better, which was a blessing for us. But the strain on our relationship, because she was sick, we didn't really understand. We were young, and even stigmas around that disease that she had, really impacted us. So, we ended up with our mom and back in the foster care system because it just didn't work, and our relationships were no longer the same. So that's how I ended up in the foster care system initially.
Wow, thank you. I'm so sorry about your mother. That's terrible.
Yeah, it's still, in a way, I still feel some shame talking about that. But over the years, I have taken the initiative to learn more about it myself. As someone who was in the foster care system, I didn't know anything about that. In fact, growing up, I think I used to tell people my mom had cancer just because I
Hmm.
think that was something bad that my mom had. Like I didn't even know what that was. And I think some people still don't today. And I definitely didn't know that it was an epidemic. So, having unprotected sex puts everyone at risk. And,
Hmm.
she was one of those people who,
Right.
contracted that disease, unfortunately. Yeah.
Hmm. So, okay, let's move forward a little bit here in your story. So, now you're in the foster care system. How does that happen, and how long were you there?
So when we finally went back in the foster care system, or when I went back in the foster care system, I would say I was probably about 13 or 14 years old. Skipping school, things like that. Um, that was pretty much the extent of it. But like, ended up back into the foster care system as a teenager and really stayed into the foster care system as a teenager. During that time, I was at least in like 6 foster homes at least. I know I went to 5 different high schools, kind of bounced back and forth. It wasn't really good. I won't say that I was like a horrible teenager, but I had a boyfriend and I didn't want to go to school. Like, in the ninth grade, I had no credit. So being a doctoral student today is definitely surprising. I would never believe you if you said that that's what I would be like later. So that just didn't work out, not for my mom. And then of course not in the foster care system either. So that's how that happened. When I was sold by a foster parent, I actually ended up in a foster home. So let me back up. So in the ninth grade, as I mentioned, I was skipping school. I was in a foster home, living in a shelter, skipping school, totally just, I don't know, did not see the value in education at all. And I had a teacher come up to me who, and this is kind of like a turning point in my whole life, right? I had a teacher come up to me. Her name was Miss Long. I still remember her, my biology teacher at one of the schools I went to. I didn't even know she noticed me, but apparently she did because I wasn't in her class. And so this is how they kind of found out I was in the foster care system. She wanted to like call my parents and say, Lakievia is not in class. Like, why? And then she found out that I was in the foster care system and staying in a shelter. And oh my gosh, it was not good. But she pulled me out of class and she said, Lakievia, I know that you are, living in a shelter, and I was just trying to find out why you weren't going to school. And I won't tell them that you've been skipping school if you don't skip my class again. And I will not, suspend you or anything like that if you come to class because you're really smart and I really want you to be here. So that was a turning point for me. I'd never been suspended from school or anything like that. Sylvia, I see you went off mute. You
Yeah,
have a
well, I
question?
wanted you to, because you glossed over this. You said you were in foster care, staying in a shelter. So can you tell the public how that happens? Because people assume that if you are in foster care, that you are in a loving home, and you're
Mm.
saying you were in foster care and you were in a shelter.
Yeah, so I went into an emergency shelter for 90 days or so. So sometimes, like, if you don't have a foster home, if there isn't a foster home for you, then sometimes you can be placed in a shelter. So go ahead.
It wasn't a group home though, right? Was it like a,
It's kind of like a group home, but it's just temporary.
okay.
So it was like it is a group home. So I guess that's a really good question because that can kind of be interchangeable a little bit, that language there,
Right.
depending on how it's structured.
Yeah. Was it just girls only or was it girls and boys?
Nope, girls and boys, all ages. And to be honest, I had gone to so many foster homes. Before that, I had been to a couple or a few, and then after that, I had been to a few. And honestly, out of like all of the places, the shelter, we call it the shelter, was really probably the best place I lived. And I'm going to tell you why. As much as I hate the group home setting, um, I liked living there because I had my own room. Unfortunately, I shared it with my sister, and that wasn't the greatest. But we had our own bathroom, which in every foster home I ever lived in, I never had that. In every foster home I lived in, I shared a room with somebody else, usually, and somebody who wasn't my sister. I was lucky if it was just me, um, or excuse me, if it was just me and one other person. And usually there were more than that in the same bedroom. So that was a plus. We like again, like I said, I always share the bathroom with everybody. But that was a plus to have our own bathroom. It was also a plus that they washed our clothes. It was a plus that I always had food, 3 meals a day. So if I wasn't just, having breakfast and lunch at school, if it was the weekend at the shelter, I had breakfast, lunch, and dinner there. None of the foster homes that I can think of, well, I won't say none. There may be maybe one or two um provided that. And
I hope
yeah.
people are hearing this. Uh, thank you for just telling it because people like assume that a foster home, you get your food, you get, Gino, am I right? Like you just assume that you're getting all of these things that you're supposed to getting. And that's not how it works.
Well, I think it's reasonable to assume that when you know how much money they're getting per child and per home for foster care. So, what are they doing with the money other than spending it on the child that's living at their home? I mean, that's a
Well, they
question
spend
we
it on
need to ask.
themselves,
Yeah. Yeah.
not on the child.
Addictions, it could be recreation, it could be vacations. Yeah. And unfortunately, and I don't know what the percentage is, Lakievia, I would say it's pretty high that most of these kids are could be malnutritioned, um, lack clothing, lack school supplies, lack discipline, lack parental supervision. It's I don't know.
Nurture.
It's nurturing. Yeah, that's another one. And so we find that there's quite a few runaways from group homes. That's a very common
And
thing.
foster
Runaways
homes.
from foster homes, sneaking out the window at night. Were you ever sneaking out windows or going out back doors, Lakievia?
Oh, it is so
I
funny you
swear I'm
asked
not
that.
gonna. You're not gonna be grounded. I just need to know.
I mean, it is so funny you asked that because the foster parent who sold me actually trapped me into that situation because she nailed the window shut. So they're not supposed to do that. So I heard later because, it's a fire hazard, first of all. But they do that because, of course, like you said, people leave out the window. Now, no one was really jumping out of the window at her house. And I didn't even know that window was nailed shut. But we'll get to that later because what she did was absolutely planned. Good question.
Well, it's I don't know if it's a good question. It's just that we see it so often that it needs to be stated again. Because if there's new viewers that come across this channel and they're like, "What the heck is this show about?" I want people to understand what's really going on, where taxpayer money is going. It's coming out of your Social Security and it's going to Title 4E and it's being spread amongst the states and it's billions of dollars. And it's a lot of, I'm not saying there isn't any good foster parents. I don't want to paint with a broad brush. I'm sure there's good foster parents out there that are doing it for the right reasons. They're really trying to help kids. But I think even some of them are misled. And we actually had a woman on our show, this is a while back now, that was misled by that system. They were foster parents for years, and then they realized, wait a minute, what is going on here? Because the biological mother, she found out, was actually a very good mother. But they had taken her child under some other auspicious, nefarious things. I don't remember what it was, but that happens quite a bit. And so we're not saying, I don't want to just say they're all bad, because no, there are some good people out there that are doing it for the right reasons, and they might even be spending the money on the child. But in general, and again, I wish we had the numbers on this. I mean, I would tend to say it's probably above 80%, that 80% of foster homes are not good homes for children. When you, Sylvia, I always forget the number. What's the runaway rate that NCMEC?
Well, the rate, it's 88% of sex trafficking victims come from the foster system. So that's a really high number, which, basically is what you're explaining how it happens. Like, people don't understand how it happens and they assume. But yeah, we don't want to say everyone is bad in the system. There are good foster parents, there are good social workers, there are good people, but more than not, it is a trafficking
Network.
Yeah.
And half of the children who are in the foster care system really don't have to be in the foster care system at all. So just like what you just said, Gino, a lot of people don't know that either. Like, there is this stigma and this ingrained belief that if a child is in the foster care system, they're there because their parents, number one, totally criminalized in every single situation, are the worst people on earth, and have done something so wrong and don't care about their children and all these things. But the truth of the matter is that half of the children in the foster care system shouldn't even be there.
Right.
And they don't want to be there. That's the other thing that I learned, was that they don't want to be there. And that's the reason that they're running away, is that they're running away to be with the people that they want to be with.
Yeah. So I did run away a couple of times. And I remember at one point as a teenager being asked by a friend if I wanted to stay with them. So a friend of mine, her mom had asked, do you want to live with me? And, the short answer was yes, but I actually said no. And the reason why I said no is because, having been in the foster care system, to have someone else like that, and we're going to talk about that here very shortly, third parties, right? To have, especially when you're in the foster care system, they have to go through, hell and high water, excuse my French. Like, we can't even go to the movies without them, in theory, getting a whole background check. They need your social security number. So even just going to the movies without getting permission made me a runaway. And that had happened before. Like, I actually, with this very same friend, stayed with a foster parent who gave me permission to go to the movies with this person. And we went to the movies. I came back. This lady kicked me out of the house, because she wanted to. But apparently, I guess she tried to say that she didn't tell me she could go, or whatever the case may be. That wasn't even it. She just said I was a bad person, a bad kid. And I'm like, you told me I could do that. So, even that kind of stuff is just like, happens a lot in these foster homes. And speaking for myself, like, there's no support. I didn't have any support there. Like, if that happens to me, I came home from school one day at another foster home, high school, and my stuff was in the middle of the street. I walked into the bedroom and I'm like, where is my stuff? Getting off of school now. I was going to school, doing everything I'm supposed to do, go home to this foster home, go into this place, go into my room, and all my stuff is gone. And I asked the foster parent, where is my stuff? She was like, didn't you see that trash bag in the middle of the street? That's your stuff. Went to another foster home, and I did nothing to this lady. It's the craziest situation ever. And that is not a healthy environment.
Well, what was the reason? How did she just
Nothing.
Did you like?
There was not a reason. I have my own thoughts, and part of my own thoughts is that my foster parent, and she told me the other foster parent who trafficked me called her I don't know what she was talking about, but that foster parent told me that. Another foster parent told me that. My ex mother in law told me that. Like, this lady was like stalking me. So I guess she made me upset, or like made this other foster parent upset by whatever she said. I don't know. The lady kicked me out of the house. Like, I was like harassed by this particular foster parent. So yeah, but I
So,
didn't do anything.
so did a social worker come and pick you up, and then they found another home for you?
I'm going to say yes. It was so long ago. I don't remember like who picked me up or anything like that. Plus, the turnover rate is super high.
Yeah.
But it would have to have been like a yes, because I ended up in another foster home, and that's not something I arrange on my own. That's something they arrange.
Yeah, yeah, it could be a transporter. I mean,
A
they
train. Yep. Yeah. It could have been
they
that. Yeah.
they literally are like, hey, I don't have time to pick this child up, take him to another home. They'll contract a transporter. The transporter will pick them up and then take them. So yeah,
When you're being placed in other people's families, if they have families already, or even if they don't, I mean, how do you assimilate as a child? I mean, I can't even. I didn't even mature until I was mid 20s, okay? Mentally. Like to imagine being 13, 14, 15 years old and trying to assimilate to somebody else's home and lifestyle, and most of these people's lifestyles aren't very good. Um, how does your brain cope with that when you're that young?
Mm, I don't know. I hate using words like most and all, and we'll say some. Safe side, because there are some good people out there, and there are some horrible people out there. So those some horrible people, it's very hard to get accustomed to living with them. Even with some of the really good people, it can be very, very hard living with them because there is an issue with stability. So you may be in a quote unquote good household, which is very rare. So to your point, Gino, that is very rare. Um, but the likelihood that you're gonna stay there, past 6 months or even a year is very low, and there's there's the dynamic of having to deal with the family. Children don't even understand this. I'm 38 years old, going on 39 here, within the next year soon, but I'm already counting my age early because I had to grow up fast. So in my mind, I'm always counting the clock. I spent my teenage years counting the day I turned 18 every single day. When will I be 18 so I can go? And at this age now, I'm still processing and I'm realizing how hard that is, learning to deal with these other people, live with these other people we don't know, their children. And then even outside of the neighborhood you're in, one of the foster homes I was in, as a matter of fact, the one that I was just telling you about, who put my stuff in the street, somebody from her neighborhood walked up to me one day and said, I know you're coming from that house. You need to be careful when you're out here walking in these streets. Because, like Sylvia said, we're being trafficked. We're definitely like targeted, right? And so now everybody in the whole neighborhood knows that you live at this foster home. Kids are coming in and out of this foster home all the time. Kids are out in the street all night, all time of night, doing whatever. And they all know they live with this person right here. So you come out of that house, you're already a target because they know who you are. They know no one's watching you. And they have in their mind, no one cares about you either. So it's all of that. And is there a way to assimilate to that? No. There is a way to possibly just get used to it. That's it.
Yeah, I would say you have to just cope with it, and coping can be many different ways and many
Oh,
different things for different people. I mean, some people go to resort to drugs or alcohol, sex, running away, whatever that coping mechanism is to protect yourself. And even if I should say, even if you think you're being protected, even if you think you have some good people watching out for you, there still has to be something in the back of your mind like, I don't know these people. Like that I would, that old saying, sleep with one eye open. I mean, you're in a stranger's home and now you're trying to get used to living there and get used to their customs and their way of doing things. Um, I can't, I've often thought to myself, like, how in the world would I cope with that? How would I personally be able to deal with that? I don't even like spending the night at someone else's home.
Oh, I
And I
don't
know
do
I'm
that.
going home the next day, like even when I was a kid, I didn't like doing that. So it's just, that has always been a question mark for me personally.
No, you asked a really great question, and I'm glad that you're bringing this up because I can speak from experience. In fact, I was just speaking nationally for the Foster Care Alumni of America just last month, and we talked about housing. We talked about ending up homeless and stuff like that, and as weird as it may sound, foster children or foster care alumni, people who were in the foster care system, probably don't want to be homeless, but they may be so accustomed to that lifestyle of couch surfing, right? Of just making a way that I think that eventually, I've been homeless myself, just get numb to it all, right? Now I don't really like having roommates. I don't really like staying at someone else's house. Like I would pay more money to stay in a hotel than to stay with someone else just because I finally have like my own space and it's something I don't have to do. As opposed to before, I was being forced to do that. And at that age, you're not even thinking about, oh, these are strangers. You have in your mind, you've been taught in your mind that okay, they might be strangers, but these are safe people. These are people who I don't have to worry about coming to me at the middle of the night telling me I need to go have sex with somebody for her, or putting my stuff out in the street, or making me clean up their whole house, or making me feed and cook everybody, cook for everybody in the whole house while they do nothing, or who are going to make me beg them to unlock a freezer so I can cook because I don't have any food and they're not cooking for me. Like, no one's saying this is the situation you might be in, and we're not taught that. So, I mean, there is no just it's okay, right? It's just that this is the situation we're stuck in. And if our parents don't come and get us, who knows what's going on with them, then this is just it. So we just count down. I just count down until I turn 18. And that's how I spent my teenage years.
So you made me think of something else. Okay, so you said you didn't have anything to eat sometimes days on end. Um, who do you call? I mean, can you call the social worker and say, "Hey, they're not feeding me. I'm in this home and they're supposed to be feeding me, clothing me, getting me off to school, picking me up, and none of this is happening." I mean, was there anybody there to help you? An
I
adult
had an
there to help?
independent living. Sorry, what were you saying just now?
So, well, I mean, any adult that would help you that was in the system that was actually farming you out to these foster care homes.
I had an independent living coordinator and I was very close. So when I turned 14, I had an independent living coordinator and I was very close to the transporter I had. Like my transporter was really the only stability in my life. And to this day, I still talk to her. Um, and I could tell her, like, you know what I mean? Or I could tell her, I could tell my independent living coordinator. There were times where I did tell my independent living coordinator certain things and she did try to fix it. There are issues I later had with her, but like she became my social worker. I didn't really have a social worker. And so when she got mad at me, I didn't have the support that I needed. And sometimes we get retaliated against when we talk about our foster parents and stuff because the state will move us out of those homes, but they get kind of upset. Some of the caseworkers get upset if they are getting all kinds of complaints, because then now there's a shortage in foster homes, and this might not be a foster home that needs to be open.
Yep.
So, and then
I would,
it
yeah,
go ahead, Sylvia.
well, I was just gonna respond too, because as a social worker that would have a foster child say something, what they do, Gino, is then the social worker goes to the foster parent and says, this child said that you're not feeding her and there's a lock on the freezer. And then they go in there
Yep.
and the foster parent says, look, she's lying. There's no lock on here. So it's a game that they play where, and then I've had foster kids tell me stuff, and then when I would take it to the director or the supervisor, they would make fun of me. They would call me green. They'd tell me to get thicker skin. Um, did she have any bruises on her? Did she have any marks on her? Um, did I look and see if there was a lock on the freezer? And of course, when you're in the home, there's not going to be a lock on the freezer, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And then the downside is that we have to live there with these people. You know, I got to a point where as a teenager, I had to go and ask. I had one foster parent, she cooked every single day for this is so interesting. So this was actually the last foster home I lived in before my independent living coordinator basically let me go live with my grandmother, you know, without anybody knowing. And I just went and lived with my grandmother finally and just stayed there. But I lived in a foster home prior to that. And this lady cooked every single day. She had babies and she had a couple of teenagers, including me. And I had to go to her and say, like, why don't you give us any food? You know, and she said, well, okay, I cook for the babies because y'all are adults and y'all are old enough to make your own food. But if you want to eat, I'll start leaving some food out. And I said, great. You know, in this home, the only time I ate was breakfast and lunch at school when I got $10 allowance. So when I received my allowance of just $10 a week, and not even every foster home gave me that. I didn't even know I was supposed to get an allowance, but this particular foster parent actually did give me my allowance every single week. That allowance I used every single week to go up the street to Burger King and eat dinner. I had dinner once a week. I went to Saturday school while I was living there with her, studying for my graduation test. I needed to do that anyway. And there was an incentive because the principal of the school bought us breakfast every day. You know, that was the only time I ate.
Oh
When I
gosh.
went home, when I went to my grandmother, I was so small. Like I was the smallest I'd ever been in my whole life. And I've always kind of been like a bigger girl. Like, I mean, I had a washboard stomach and everything. And the reason why is because I wasn't eating.
That's horrible. You know, you bring up a really good point. You mentioned your grandmother, and now I can already hear people saying, well, why wasn't she just living with her grandmother? Can you tell
Well,
that
I
story?
did start living out with my grandmother. Sorry, I cut you
But
off.
but
Again.
why not when you were younger? Why couldn't you go to your grandmother's house, you know, when you were 11 years old, 12 years old?
That's a great question. We did. So when my mom was really, really sick, my grandmother used to travel like 45 minutes one way to take care of my mom and to make sure that my brother, my sister, and I were like getting on the school bus and going to school and things like that. That got really, really hard for my grandmother. So we actually all went to go live with my grandmother, the three of us and my mom. And my grandmother even gave up her bed and let my mom stay there. But my mom and us, we weren't the only people there. So my mom has a brother and he lived there also with his children. So there was like a family of 10 people in a single wide 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom trailer. My grandmother and my cousin ended up getting into like a fist fight, like seriously bad. And I called the police because I was terrified. Like I had my mom kept us in a very sheltered lifestyle. Like we went to church, she didn't drink, she didn't curse, like none of that. So like to see this fist fight, like, and there's just blood and all this stuff, like I called the police. And at this time it was in Columbia County. So I was in a foster care system in Columbia County and Richmond County. Richmond County is where all that horrible stuff happened. Columbia County is where I went into the foster care system first. Bad stuff kind of happened there, but I had a good foster parent at that time. I just didn't stay long because my dad got us. But anyway, so I went into the foster care system there because our caseworker came when I called the police, when my grandmother and my cousin got in a fight, and she said, well, do you want to stay here or do you want to go into the foster care system? And I made the choice to go in the foster care system. Now, so I would say, you know, I definitely hold some blame being 11, 12-ish, you know, making the choice to go into the foster care system. but I did not know anything about the foster care system. I knew my mom was sick. I knew there was blood all over the place because my grandmother and my child's cousin got into a fist fight, like horrible. And that was just not a good environment. In addition to 10 people, that was not a good environment for my brother and sister and I. And like my mom would never want us there. So that's how we ended up in the foster care system.
But even so, even though it was your choice to go as a young girl, you're kind of naively going into a system that is devouring children, literally devouring them. So, you know, even though you made a decision, it wasn't an adult decision, you still should have been safe in that environment. And I guess that's what we try to expose here, is that it is not a safe environment for children. There is just way too many things that can go wrong in these homes, for especially young girls. My gosh, I mean, like recently there was that video of, I think it was a pimp or something, and the girls were coming out of a group home, and they're pimping these 13, 14-year-old girls out. And you're like, my God, where's the police? Where's the authorities? Where's the owner of the group home? Like, nowhere to be found. And so it's, you got these young minds that can't make adult decisions. Why should they have to suffer at the hands of adults that should be responsible and should be caring for these children? So I wouldn't pin the blame on you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I kind of feel a little guilty, a little bit. My brother, he lived with somebody for a very long time. When he turned 18, I don't really know what happened in that foster home. You would have to ask him. But when he turned 18, he left really and didn't look back. But he had that stability. Unlike my sister and I, we were in different foster homes. My sister actually ended up institutionalized during her last couple of years in the foster care system, which often happens. So there's a foster care to prison pipeline and really a foster care to institution. I mean, just in general, I guess it's a foster care to institution because, some foster children have psychological disorders, and some of them are really serious. Some of them may not be. Some of them are just, alleged. At any rate, if a student, I'm sorry. As you can see, I work with students. Sorry, I probably didn't tell you that. So I always say student. And they should be, right? We're learning. So that is the school of hard knocks. Trust me when I say that. The foster children, if they, are labeled like to have a psychological disorder, and if they are given medication, prescribed any kind of medication, the foster care system gets more money for them. And they are labeled therapeutic. So there's a benefit in saying there's something wrong with you mentally. There always has been. That's always been a thing. And then, of course, there's that foster care to prison pipeline where if you're in the foster care system, you are highly likely to end up in jail or prison. Very young, from the time you're 16, whatever, you're going to jail. And so there is a very horrible just connection between all of that I know some people aren't aware of, especially when it comes to mental health.
Well, you bring up a good point. That is a pipeline to prison for many children, unfortunately. And I don't know, I know Sylvia and I and Danielle have talked about this before. We believe it's kind of intentional, really. I mean, it's all about money. So you get them young and you get them while they're middle-aged, and then you get them when they become seniors. So you can get their whole life, the whole gamut. It's kind of sick when you really look at it. So speaking of, just mental problems and anguish and things like that, I mean, I suspect most kids would definitely have some kind of mental anguish just from being separated from parents. I mean, that's a given. I mean, I always use the example of, I remember I was like 5 years old and I was in a shopping center with my mom, and I kind of just wandered off and I was hiding in the clothes and she couldn't find me. She was in a full-blown panic. I'm in a panic because I can't find my mom. I'm crying, and and someone helped me. They brought me up to they had to make an announcement on the PA at the store or whatever. But it's like, that was only for like 10 minutes. And I still remember that as a kid. I still remember that feeling. And I cannot imagine a child for their whole, youth having to experience this separation anxiety. And of course, that's going to cause mental anguish and mental problems that they're going to need a therapist, and then ultimately put them on psychotropic drugs. It's I use the word designed. It's actually Sylvia. I steal it from Sylvia. She said it's designed this way. Can I prove that it's designed this way? No, but I think we have enough evidence at this point to show that yes, it is designed this way, so that they can get you in big pharma also. And then the therapists get in on the game. Everybody's in on making money except the poor kid who, like you said, sometimes you got your $10 a week and you might get to eat. But most of the time you didn't even see your allowance, which, I mean, give me a break, $10. And
Right.
Sylvia, what were they making per child and per home on average? Isn't it like $1,100 or something?
Oh, yeah. When I left the system, it was $1,000 to $2,000 per month per child.
Is that with a therapeutic child?
So the therapeutic child, it really depends on, it was 200 per day per child. So 200 times 30, what is that? That's I have to add it up, but it was about, I think, 1,500 per child on a therapeutic. And then if they are sex trafficked, sexually abused, it is more. So let's see.
Well, any disability is more, correct?
Right.
If a child has
right.
a disability, yeah.
The behaviors, and if it also, if they consider you a runaway. So even though your foster parent kicked you out and said you ran away, even if you didn't run away, you're considered a runner, then that's more money. All of those things are more money. So.
Yeah. I don't know about all of that. I know when I was in the foster care system, so that was like in 2002-ish, 2000, that very early 2000. I think they were making like $400 maybe a month for foster children. Well, for regular kids like me, right? So I have no history of, like having psychological disorders or anything like that. For children who did, or who are like on medication and they're labeled therapeutic, I think they were paying $1,500 a month for them. Now, I totally was labeled out of control at some point, right? Because I used to skip school, and there's really no telling what else they said about me, and it's just language. That's another thing, right? Who we are is like nothing. I'm not going to say we, I'm going to speak for myself right now. And I'll speak for myself and say that I was always only whoever they said I was. So, I'm here with you today. And at that particular time, I would not have been able to do that. So see, technology right now has totally changed just our lives in the best way, because now we can connect to each other. Now we can speak to people like you. Before, isolation was key. So they can put us in a closet somewhere and easily tell somebody else, oh, Lakievia ran away. You can throw me in a trash can and go tell somebody I ran away. And nobody would know the difference, because nobody even knows where I am. And there's no way for me to communicate. I didn't have cell phones, anything like that, internet. How am I supposed to ask for help?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Right.
So your question?
Yeah, that does. And I think the other thing to think about here too is, I think the assumption most people have is a foster kid is kind of a troubled kid. And so, the foster parents are probably disciplining them or doing something appropriate so that this child can grow up and be a productive adult.
That's the stigma. That's the stigma
They've
placed on them. They've placed that on the children. They've placed the stigma of the parents being a bad parent, and that's why the child is in the foster system. Foster parents are good. Social workers are good. Those are the stigmas that are placed, and that's what we're breaking that narrative.
You know what? 1% of the children who go in the foster care system go into the foster care system because of the death of a parent. 1%. Technically, I am in that 1%. My mom was given 6 months to live, right? I did not go into the foster care system because my mom put cigarette butts out in my eyeballs or on my back or any of this outrageous craziness that we're automatically going to jump to the conclusion happened to a child because they're in a foster care system. Are foster children troubled? I would say yes. And just like you said, Gino, part of that is because they're dealing with separation anxiety, whether they know it or not. They're alone. You know, they're going through a lot of change that even adults can't understand. So that is trouble. And we're very lucky right now also that these conversations are coming to the forefront because of people like you, because people are talking about mental health. There is a study out right now, or a report that just came out called On the Threshold of Change. It came out from the Institute for the Future and the Youth Law Center, I believe. It's a great report. And in this report, they're talking about mental health being on a spectrum. I was just talking to someone 2 days ago and I said, how did you feel when the hurricane hit? The day before the hurricane, everybody felt great. We got hit by Hurricane Helene over here. The day after Hurricane Helene hit, or that morning when we woke up and everything was destroyed, how did you feel then? Everybody is on a spectrum of mental health. We can cry. We should be able to cry. We should be able to get angry. So children like us, children who are in the foster care system, should not be placed in a box and labeled because they act out because they're living somewhere they don't even know of. They might not even know the neighborhood they're in. They may not have talked to their brother and sister in like a year. They may not have seen their parents in years. And they have no trajectory of what's happening tomorrow, next week, or next year, because we truly are at the mercy of other people and adults at that. So we can say they're trouble, but not in a way that like stigmatizes them or says that they're a bad person. Those two things are not the same, and they shouldn't be like put together like they are, if that makes sense.
Amen.
So true. Yeah, I don't know. I've thought about, well, what does it look like on the other side? Is foster care still going to be something in the next 5 years, 10 years? Or is it completely dismantled and something new comes and replaces it? There's always going to be orphans for sure. I mean, the Bible talks about take care of orphans and widows. Yeah. But it doesn't say take children from good parents and give them to somebody else and pay that person and incentivize them to steal children, incentivize a system. And so that's the part that's kind of difficult, because we need something in place for the orphans and for the widows, obviously. But I don't know what that looks like. I mean, personally, I'm a Christian, so I believe the church needs to step up and, do what it's called to do and help these people, like faith-based type organizations maybe. But it can't be incentivized. Anytime money is dangled like a carrot in front of people, it's usually not going to end up good. It's going to tempt that person to either feed their addictions or go wayward. Very few people can handle that kind of money just coming in every month. Like it's let's say you're working and you're already making a salary, and now you're like, oh yeah, I still got that $1,100 coming at the end of the month, and you're not even thinking about that poor kid that it's supposed to be spent on, most of it anyway. I mean, obviously there's cost of living, utilities and things like that, but I don't know how it looks. Do you have any ideas what that might look like on the other side, Lakievia?
I would love to share what I think. So do you see this right here? This poster, if I use my finger, this right here? Yeah. Okay, so that's my superhero poster. That poster is a symbolism of my strength. So I've created myself. That's actually a costume. I can't draw, but it's a superhero costume. And what you see is my head up there. And you see my character strengths. And you see my values and things that are important to me. I think going forward, no matter who steps up to really do this, going forward, we need to implement a strength-based system to really help the kids who are in the foster care system or the children who are in the foster care system identify their strengths and what makes them powerful. That's important to me because here's a superhero poster, but I also love superheroes, right? So this is totally my thing. And if you think about the superheroes we know of, they're orphans, right? Batman, Superman, Cruella, her movie came out a couple of years ago. It was super awesome. Orphan, who knew that she was an orphan? Cinderella, an orphan. You know, we can go on and on and on about people who are like, well, Cinderella is not a superhero, right? But she is a princess. She was orphaned, you know. And if we start looking at these people who we don't even think about, but really, really idolize, even Spider-Man, he was an orphan. Both of his parents died, you know, but look at them. They're powerful, they're strong, they have so many talents. And when you ask them to step up, they're the people who are saving the world. And so, if we can implement that mentality and help people understand that we have strengths and that those strengths need to be utilized, they need to be fostered, and they need to be cultivated from day one. And if we're given the resources to do that, I think we'll have a stronger foster care system. And we will not have foster children who are sick. We will not have foster children who are in prison. We will not have foster children who are uneducated unless they truly are making that decision on their own, because they're going to know that they're so much better than that. And if we can have that happen, like, this world would be a better place.
No,
That's
agree.
my thought.
No, those are good ideas. And I have thought about this. I do think that the answer does have to come from kids that have been there, kids that understand the inner workings of the machine, and caseworkers like Sylvia that were blowing the whistle on it. People that understand and have hearts for human life. I mean, let's face it, you know, kids are humans. I know nowadays it seems like that's in question, but it's not. These are human beings. They have rights. They have a whole life ahead of them and endless possibilities. And
That's right.
they're being squashed by their dreams are being squashed by a system that's just not benefiting a child. And I hate to see
Right.
that. And so I think it's awesome what you're doing, Lakievia. Like, you've got these ideas, you got these thoughts, and you were there, you've been there, lived it out, and you know other people. I know there's on TikTok, they adoptees, hashtag adoptees. It's a huge community. All of those
Love that
kids
hashtag.
are now adults. You know, most of them are adults, aged out of the system. It's nice to have a community where you can bounce ideas off of each other. And then I believe when the system does crumble and fall, you guys will be there ready to build something new and better. And it will be for the right reason.
And it will be because we've been taught early on how to do it, because we've had to do it for ourselves. And so that in and of itself is a strength in who we are. We're survivors.
Amen.
So, you know, we need to recognize that and start that whole relationship with that mindset. I have to correct myself. Cruella wasn't a superhero until her movie came out, where we got to see the backside of it. But again, to support this whole conversation we're having, that's what we need to see going forward. We knew Cruella being this evil person. We heard her story, what happened to her and how she became to be. And we saw it in a positive light. And so if we're viewed that way as well, and again, we're coming into the foster care system technically as victims, right? If you're assuming that we, you know, were beat up, you know, then we're victims. So please don't view us as criminals because we're in the foster care system. Like, we're trying to survive just like everyone else. We don't know you. You know, show us how. If we don't have the ability to be kind, if we are angry, show us how not to be by not being that way yourself. And start that way. That's my ask.
Great
Amen.
ideas. Yeah, I love it. That's the answer. And
Yeah.
Sylvia, I think you kind of feel the same way, right? I mean, you just feel like it's going to be
Oh
people
yeah. I
that
mean, it
that
was,
have
yeah.
hearts.
Yes, and honestly, that's what I seen when I would drop off the kids at each, different home, was that, like, these children aren't greeted with nurture and love and excitement. They're greeted with, these are my rules and you live with them or you're out. Those are the words that they're greeted with. It's not, hey, we're so happy to have you here. We hope you enjoy our home. That's not it. And as a kid, like, they need nurture, they need love, they need to be a kid. And they're not able to do that because they're automatically placed into survival mode. And I've been at
Yeah.
places where when I get there, the kid already knows this isn't going to work, because when the foster parent meets them at the door and they say, "These are my rules and you live by them or you're out," that kid is already bolting. And there are times that you have to leave with the kid and then you have nowhere to go. It's just it's got to be more like you said, if you're victims, where is the nurture and the love? Why has it been taken out? Um and I think that's by design, because that's exactly what our supervisors and directors and all the trainings that we got told, this is your bubble. This is your bubble right here, and you don't go past this bubble, and you don't speak about yourself. You don't tell stories about yourself. You don't they want you to take that connection and cut it off. They don't want a bond, because then if you have a bond, if you have someone for that child to go to, then uh, that child has an outlet. It has love. It has nurture. It's just it's all messed up. It's all messed up. But um, I agree with what you were saying. Like show by love, nurture, and how to not be angry if that's the case. Um, Total
Absolutely.
agreement.
Yep. That's the answer. Love's always the answer. I mean, let's face it. And, you know, that's actually a really good point about the victim. I mean, I think most people understand that if someone's been hurt by another person and you know, in any way, sexual, let's say it's sexual abuse, there should be an empathy for that person, a compassion for that person. There should be love for that person and understanding, like, my gosh, what have you gone through? I'm so sorry you had to go, you know, and a hug and I'm there for you, you know, if you need to talk to somebody. But these poor kids, they have nobody to talk to. No one that's going to hug them and say, well done, or it's going to be okay. We're going to get through this together, you know, or like, it's just, I can't
Right.
imagine that. And it's just, yeah, heartbreaking. What was that, Sylvia?
I said, or even give them food. You
Yeah,
know.
right. Yeah, the basics. My gosh. So,
So much. Go
Lakiva, did
ahead.
you want to go over to your slides?
Well, I think that this was a great conversation. I feel like maybe we should have a part two.
Okay.
I think maybe in short, just I am fighting for my children. Having been in the foster care system, my thought is that if anyone should know how to take care of their children and should not ever have to go through losing their children, it should be someone who was in the foster care system.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. Well, why don't we
some
we have 2 hours, so if let's just go right into it. Let's go into that side of your story now with your own children.
yeah, so I have I don't in short, I have gone through a custody dispute for 14 years, 12 years now. It's been a very long time. I was married, got divorced, and basically left this relationship because it was an abusive relationship. Throughout the whole process, I've been bullied and have been fighting for my children. I was labeled to be mentally ill. I wasn't given any support through the court, and I'm the only person who has done anything to stand up for my children, to show stability. Having been in the foster care system, I had in my mind, well, I have to get my kids, I have to have a job, I have to have a house, I have to basically be perfect, right? I have to be more perfect than anybody else, including the foster parents that I live with. And all of that was proven wrong. So, and here we are today, lots to talk about here. And we can talk about it, but I also feel like, we have said so much to the audience today just about the dark side of the foster care system and how to make it better, that I almost want to leave them with that.
Yeah, we can
um,
do that. That's fine.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
no
can do
problem.
that.
Yeah,
I
absolutely. We
I
understand.
actually enjoyed the way that you described the foster system, because it's so much easier coming from you, who lived it, than me trying to explain it as a social worker who would see the kids and the social, like you said, you didn't even have a caseworker. You don't even remember a caseworker. So that goes to show you there's an issue right there. But I really enjoyed the way that you described it and made people see what it's really like for a foster child.
Thank you. And I am happy to be here. If we have the time, how long do we have for the show today?
We usually go up to 2 hours, but it doesn't have to be 2 hours. Sometimes it's an hour, sometimes it's an hour and a half. That's totally up to you. If you want to do another show, we can always schedule another show and get the other side of your story. If you want to continue, we can continue. But I do want to say one thing, Lakievia, and I told you this before we started. I just appreciate your smile, your attitude, because I know that many people that come out of that system do not have that attitude. They've been hurt so bad they cannot escape that attitude. And it's refreshing to see someone smiling, enjoying life, even though you're going through trials and have been through trials. I just think that that's an awesome thing.
Thank you. We have an hour, so I'm watching the clock. I'm a project manager, so I'm always time boxing. How much time do we have? Where are we at? Thank you very much. I can say it's really taken a long time to get to where I am today, and even to talk to you without screaming. Like, I can't even believe I've done that. If I haven't been screaming, that's surprising to me. But I've strengthened my skill in being able to talk about this through writing. So I'm a writer. I am attending Liberty University right now at the back end of working on my doctorate degree. And I've felt like, my personal experience there has been safe. I've had a safe experience where I have had a safe space to talk about these things. I've done research, and it strengthened my ability to be able to talk about this. And so I'm happy to tell you about the custody battle that I've been going through with my children, because I really don't feel like I should have ever gone through the torture that I have gone through the court system. Are you ready for this conversation?
Oh yeah, we discuss family court quite a bit on this show, so we love to hear these stories. I don't mean love in the respect of love hearing it again. Oh, good, it's happening again. No, we want it to end. We want to expose family court for the sham that it is. It's a rigged system, and I think people need to understand it. And anybody that's been through it understands this, for the most part. So yeah, please share.
Yeah, so I feel like buckle up for this one. So I was married. So 6 days after my 18th birthday, I got married. Which is, not necessarily ironic, for me, because I like stability in my life. So coming right out of the foster care system and getting married made sense to me, especially when my ex-husband was like begging to live with me. And I was raised not to live with someone I'm not married to. So that may have started out the wrong way. But basically, that's what I was taught. And so I said, if you want to get married, well then, if you want to live together, well, we have to get married. And we went through my church, marital counseling, all that stuff like that, and got married. So in that marriage, we had 2 children. You're a person of faith, so I feel absolutely comfortable telling you that, I heard a voice tell me to leave him loud and clear, basically, tell me to leave Jeremy. And this happened after he drugged and sexually assaulted me. I was unconscious for 7 hours. Leading up to that, we were married for 7 years. So I married him in 2004. We were married for 7 years. I filed for divorce. After that, right after that, I called the police, let the police know that he assaulted me. It was a horrible experience. And I'll tell you what it was like for me. So the night he assaulted me, I had a friend over, we were having a drink, and I didn't even drink that much. But this particular day, my friend said, hey, I want to come over. You want to have a drink? I said, sure. So we were at my house, 21 years old. He made this drink for me. All of a sudden, I felt sick in my stomach. I told my friend, I don't feel good. I'm going to go lay down. Honestly, I don't even know what happened to her. But I hate throwing up because when I was pregnant with my oldest daughter, I had hyperemesis. So all I did was just throw up for like 8 months straight. It was horrible. So I just went and laid down and just fell asleep. And that was it. I woke up the next day feeling super refreshed, feeling great. And when I woke up and actually like opened my eyes and looked, he was watching me, like he was looking at me. And he said, straight out, I had sex with you last night and you didn't even know it. So I did not know that I was drugged. I actually did not find out I was drugged until years later. I was watching this movie on the Lifetime channel, and this girl talked about experiencing the same thing that I experienced. So that's how I learned that. Going back to when he assaulted me, I called the police 2 weeks later. I waited to call the police because I felt like the police would say that, a husband can't rape his wife. And so I just waited. I was afraid. Plus, I didn't really know like what I would do next because I had my children. I was only in school at that moment. I wasn't really working. I didn't have income. And I want to pause right there and say I didn't have a lot of income outside of what was coming to me from school because I had upset my independent living coordinator who had just stopped giving me money. So I used to, as a foster child, I used to receive a former foster child who was going to college. I would receive money for rent, like a stipend. I would receive money for food, and I would receive money for school supplies, and my tuition was covered. Well, my independent living coordinator got mad at me, cut all that money off, didn't even tell me, then called this organization that I was getting a scholarship from, had them take the scholarship away from me. So I didn't have anything. I ended up getting that back. And that organization, a private organization in Virginia, took care of me. So to kind of give you an idea, I went from, having $1,000 plus a month just in like rent money and food to having like nothing. But, what did I get? $2,500, so $5,000 a year for everything. So for my tuition, for anything that I needed, bills, all that money would be paid directly to them. So going from X thousands of dollars, I usually tell people when I do the math about $40,000, $50,000 a year from the state to $5,000 a year to a private organization because the state did not want to support me anymore because my independent living coordinator was upset with me. So these are the kind of things that I had to go through. So anyway, I was afraid. I didn't really know what to do, but I called 911 anyway. The 911 dispatcher said, well, it's your fault. You shouldn't have been drinking so much, whatever, whatever. And they dropped the case. At any rate, I still filed for divorce, paid for everything, did my own paperwork and all this stuff, and filed for divorce. Little did I know, this is why, okay, so I'm going to slow down for just a minute because the connection is here and people don't understand. And I was excited to come and explain today to kind of just make this connection for people. So the connection here was, again, the state cut me off, right? The state cut me off, but somebody saved me. So I was given the opportunity. I was still supported, almost like secreted. Sometimes I tell people I was underground railroaded, right? By a private organization in the state of Virginia. The situation was so bad when this happened that my independent living coordinator, based on her own actions, really assumed in her mind that I didn't have a relationship with my scholarship director. So like Sylvia is talking about being that person somebody can call. My independent living coordinator did something really wrong. She lied to this organization. She made them think I was making all this money when she was actually the person who helped me like get this scholarship. And she got mad at me and said, oh, Lakievia is getting all this money from us because technically I wasn't supposed to be getting this scholarship from this other organization because I was getting money from the state. The money that this other organization provides is for foster children who do not have access to services like that in their state. Not all states offer, at that time anyway, some things have changed, but not all states offer funding for foster children, believe it or not. Like there's nothing there if they want to go to college, nothing. So this organization provides services to those children. So I was getting services from both people. My independent living coordinator here in Georgia actually set that up. Then when she got mad, she called and said that I was like basically trying to like fraud them. But she did that thinking that she was going to take everything away from me, thinking in her mind that I didn't have a relationship to just call this national organization and say what happened, because where I lived, we just didn't have that kind of support. So if she wasn't it, as we just saw, no one was. But it wasn't, she didn't know that like I can just call my scholarship director and say, hey, like what happened? And that's what I did. I called my scholarship director's cell phone number. I told her what happened. I said, I don't have anything to do with any of this. She set this up. Nothing has changed with my finances, blah, 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 blah. So I stayed in that program. Now, staying in that program, I made the choice to take that cut because with that program, I was treated with dignity, I was treated with respect, and I was given funding that was guaranteed. It may not have been a lot, but it was something that I could always count on, as opposed to my state, people who live right around the corner from me. I can't even count on them for anything. Why would I give up something or anybody who is really there for somebody who is not? This is my mindset. So I went with this program and stayed in that program all the way through undergrad. Even as a graduate student, I've lost a job one time and, said, hey, I need some money. Like I have a car payment, I have insurance. They sent me a check for $500, emergency fund. In the States where I was in Richmond County, they would never have anything like that. Not that I knew of. Like I couldn't call them for an emergency and just say I need something. Like they're never going to do that. So definitely made a good decision to stay there. And this all comes together because I was hidden. So I no longer had to deal with the state anymore. I no longer had to deal with their abuse. No longer had to talk to them. Nothing like that. I did everything to this other organization in Virginia, states away from even where I lived, and I was safe. I didn't have to deal with harassment. I didn't have to deal with kissing butt and telling lies and just doing all the things just to get dinner. Like I didn't have to do that anymore. So when I went into the foster care, when I went into the juvenile court because I filed for divorce, I went into the juvenile court because I had children. So in my mind, I believe having children became a back door for them to have access to my life. I didn't know that though. I'm trying to get out of this relationship that is abusive because again, having been in the foster care system, I know for a fact that the state will take children away from parents who stay in abusive relationships. So I left an abusive relationship and was penalized, filed for divorce, went through the regular court, I guess a superior court, but because I had children, it was referred to the juvenile court. The juvenile court basically let all hell break loose. Now, I may have some fault there because I told the judge, I heard a voice tell me to leave Jeremy. I've been going to counseling. I just started counseling. And the judge jumped to this whole conclusion that I was hearing voices. So when I told him that I heard a voice tell me to leave Jeremy, he said, well, are you going to counseling or anything like that? I said, yeah, I just started going to Serenity. So that was like a behavioral health center. It was free right around the corner from my house. Started going to this place just to talk because my marriage was bad. I was under harassment. It was just not good. And going to the college I was going to at the time, I had learned about mental health services. So we have a mental health center there. So I was going there for anxiety. And then, of course, learned that, to just calm down. But then I learned about Serenity and knew it was free. So I went there. So I said, yeah, I'm going to see this doctor. And he said, well, I'm going to this counseling. He said, well, what did the counseling center say? Or what did the doctor say? I said, well, he said, I'm fine. He said, are you on medication? I said, no, the doctor didn't say I needed to be on medication. And so he said, well, what did they do? I said, they put me on a mental health treatment plan. And the mental health treatment plan, and I didn't know, as I said, I just started going to this place. The mental health treatment plan was a voluntary plan that we get every 6 months. Every 6 months when we get this, we decide for ourselves what we want to do. My mental health treatment plan would say something like, I'm going to do yoga. I'm going to graduate. I'm going to finish these classes, exercise and try to eat healthier. And it changed every 6 months. And I didn't know that at that time because I just went to this place. And obviously he didn't know either. So what he said to me was, well, when you meet the requirements of your mental health treatment plan, you can come back to court. For now, you're going to get supervised visitation, and I'm going to give the kids over to, I'm going to take custody from you, and I'm going to give the kids over to the dad. Now, at this time, I had told the court he was on drugs and all this stuff. The judge just laughed at me. So he said, okay, you know, supervised visitation, never talking to a doctor, never asking for anything from the doctor. And he said that because I was living with my grandmother at that time, so I left the house, left this guy, was living back at home with my grandmother, and my grandmother was not in court with me. So my family doesn't really like meddle like my ex-husband's family, which you'll see here shortly when we talk about the appeal. I'm no longer even against him for custody with my kids. I'm against him and his mother, and his mom's name is actually listed. But that's another story. So yeah, so I said, I was living with my grandmother. He said, well, where are you living? I said, yeah, I'm living with my grandmother. He said, okay, well, you can have unsupervised, you can have supervised visitation with your grandmother being the supervisor. Well, again, my grandmother wasn't even in court. So to even say that she wants to have anything to do with that. So that was that. Now, remember I told you my grandmother got in a fight with my cousin? Well, that was not anything like not normal for her. And while I was living with her, she actually attacked me. And she attacked me. And when she attacked me, I left the house. And so now my grandmother was like no longer there to like supervise anything. And Jeremy had the kids because he had custody of them now. And I wasn't talking to my grandmother because like, I'm not going to tolerate violence. So I left. However, during this time, I still was like going through counseling. Like I was still going to school. I was still doing all these things. And in my brain, I'm thinking, okay, well, I have to get this letter that says I met the requirements of my mental health treatment plan. I have to have a job. I have to have a place to live for my kids, at least 2 bedrooms. I'm 100% conditioned to be this perfect person, right? Because I've seen how DFACS treats their parents, being someone who was in the foster care system. So it took me 3 years to get a doctor to write a letter saying I met the requirements of my mental health treatment plan. And the reason why is because at this free clinic that I was going to, the turnover there was very high. And again, the mental health treatment plan wasn't even mandatory. It was just like a life plan or something. So every 6 months I got a new one. And then finally I got this doctor years later to write something that said that. So as soon as he did that, I went back to court like a good mom would do, or a mom who cares. We're not going to say good or bad, because when we're talking in the context of the foster care system, there's really no such thing. It's just what you're either doing what somebody told you to do or you're not. It doesn't really matter if you're good or bad. Like you're either following rules and bowing your head or you're not. So I've never been the one who didn't. Like I've always been kind of rebellious. So and kind of talking about my independent living coordinator, the issue that I had with her is that I would stand up and speak out about her doing stuff for me and not doing the same thing for other children. So she would say, I don't like this person. So she wouldn't do anything for that person. If that person called, she would ignore them. And to me, that just wasn't fair. And then there are other, situations where I would have to stand up and ask people to give us stuff when the reality of the matter is that we had stuff already. We just didn't have access to it because the person who was supposed to give it to us didn't. So to me, that is just unethical. I was raised with morality, as I already spoke about my mom, integrity. Like that is just absurd, and it's fraud. You're telling me to lie, when I know we have XYZ, and the only reason why this kid doesn't have it is because you didn't give it to me, not because it's not there. So that whole conversation is just another conversation. But that's the reason why I had, trouble, in the foster care system, with my independent living coordinator, with some of these advocates who are like state, national, because I would basically say, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to lie for you. So yeah, so filed for this divorce, went through the juvenile court, and quite frankly, if you ask me, they are connected, right? So it's very likely it was just whispering going on. Oh, let's Lakievia, look, we cannot stand Lakievia. Do whatever you got to do to make a problem for her. And that's exactly, no, I could be like thinking, whatever, just making that up. But to me, there's no coincidence that all of this happened, especially when I was able to come into court and I had an attorney at that time. He didn't even represent me. So we'll just get to where I went back to court 3 years later, and I filed for a change of custody, representing myself pro se. I filed for a change of custody so that I could have unsupervised visitation with my children. I was able to get that. I met the requirements of my mental health treatment plan. I can prove stability, all the things. I did all of that, right? Perfect as can be. As I was told parents have to be to get their kids out of the foster care system. My children were never in the foster care system. Listening to me, I don't know who would ever think that I would let my kids be in the foster care system. I wouldn't. So that just would never happen. So yeah, they were not in the foster care system or anything like that. I was just fighting up against this guy who, had a powerful family apparently, and did a whole lot of things to make it very hard for me. But fortunately, when I went back into court 3 years later, I had another judge. So that was a thing that changed it, because I had an attorney the first time, and I had a different judge. Because I went back the second time, I represented myself pro se. That put me with another judge. So I had a different judge, and I had a guardian ad litem who actually took time to make sure I was seeing my children, and who was actually watching our visitation. And we'll talk about why that's a concern here later. So anyway, got custody, or got unsupervised visitation with my daughters. For 3 years, everything was going fine. I voluntarily paid child support, because they never even put a child support order out for my children. So my daughters were never even supported in the court at all. Did everything. I had a good job. I had graduated from college, all the stuff. I think I even had a master's degree when I went back and got unsupervised visitation with my children. And again, I'm supposed to be this person who's so mentally ill. My ex-husband couldn't even pass a drug test, didn't even have a job, none of that. Okay, so I'm just up against somebody who can't even compete with me. But again, I am who I am, right? So I tell people often the enemy of the state, because they cannot stand the fact that I am who I am, and I'm not helping you. My voice is so powerful, and I know this, and I'm like, no, you're wrong. They don't like to be told that they're wrong. So anyway, I got my children back. Had unsupervised visitation. Everything was going fine for 3+ years. And then again, in my mind, I'm also thinking, okay, well, I have to now rebuild this relationship with my daughters, right? I have to show them stability. I have to go through all the things, because I was in a foster care system, and this is what we have to do. And doing all this stuff because my goal is to get custody of my children, my custody back. I want my custody back. So did all that, and went back to court in 2019. I'm kind of scanning through some reports that I have here. Went back to court in 2018, and it says, I was supposed to again provide another psychological evaluation. So they're continuing to say, oh, she's crazy. And in this, the dad, he tested positive for meth. And so now we know he's a meth addict. You know what I'm saying? And it's just I want my kids, give me custody of my children. I don't want my children in that kind of environment. We had at this point had gone through 4 guardian ad litems, had a 4th guardian ad litem assigned to us who didn't even meet with my children and I at all. I don't know. It was just a lot. But to say the least, I did actually end up getting custody back of my daughters when I went back to court. And then we finally had joint custody. But when we had joint custody, he still even though he couldn't pass a drug test, even though he didn't have a place to live of his own, even though he didn't have a job, he was still the parent who got to keep the kids, who had physical custody. That's what they call it, physical custody. He had physical custody and I had custody of, we just had joint custody. Well, we had joint custody. And then he ended up, we had to go, okay, so sorry. Went back to court. When I went back to court for custody of my children, we had that same judge again because I had an attorney, right? So I went back to that very first judge who took him the first time. So, it's no surprise here, not to me, that he put me through all this stuff. Like, he wanted me to come back in and do another psychological evaluation. He looked the other way when my ex-husband tested for meth. I even filed a motion for recusal, and he agreed to step down because his wife was the mediator in my case, because the court had required me to have mediation when I first went back. And because domestic violence was an issue in the case, I had to have a mediator who specialized in domestic violence. And wouldn't you know it, there were only 2 attorneys in the whole city who specialized in that. One of them was busy and the other was his wife. So I filed a motion for recusal for all of these things this guy had put me through. And then he came back to court and said, I'll accept your motion for recusal because my wife was the mediator on your case. And I believe that was a conflict of interest. So then he assigned a new judge to the case. He he fired the 3rd guardian ad litem. The one who I said was actually involved with my kids and I was the 2nd one. They had one when we first got divorced, and then we had this 2nd one, and then we had a 3rd one who also kind of got involved, and she was kind of leaning more to my side, but she ended up stealing from me. I reported to her. It was a whole hot mess. The judge fired her, got another guardian ad litem. So now we had 4. So now my kids are going through all this with all these people, and their dad is a meth addict. My youngest daughter told me she was stepping over needles, going to school every day. The court knew this stuff. My daughter, she had been complaining that she could not see. And this is the time that I had, joint custody of my children and unsupervised visitation and stuff. I had gotten joint custody at this point. She was saying that she couldn't see. It was I don't want to say I had joint custody at this point because it was kind of like in the middle of this. So I definitely had unsupervised visitation, and we were in court so that I could get that custody back of my children. She was saying she couldn't see. I had to go to court to get my child added to my insurance so that I can take her to get an eye exam. And she had Medicaid living with her dad, and he wouldn't even go take her to see the doctor. Well, I ended up taking her to the judge, gave me permission to put her on my insurance, took her in there, found out that she had astigmatism in both eyes. So when she was saying she couldn't see, she really couldn't see. And she was saying that if she made a B or something like that, her dad would whoop her. Well, he didn't even give her the glasses or anything that she needed to be able to see the work. She couldn't even see her feet. And she was 5 feet tall. She couldn't read the 3rd line on the eye exam. Her sight was so bad. And the court knew all this stuff, and so here we are in 2018, in June 2018, I was actually granted custody of my children, re-granted custody of them again, that it is hereby ordered a judge and decree that the parties shall have joint custody. Well, you would think at that point I should just be able to go get my kids. Now we've shown mom has done all this stuff. She has custody. Dad is on drugs. He's unstable. All these things. Mom has a good job. Mom has a place to live. My daughters both have their own bedroom. All this stuff, fully furnished. I took them on a shopping spree and everything, to decorate their own room. They had everything that they could possibly need. Well, my ex-husband's mother came and filed a motion to intervene, and you can see here, kind of scroll down. I provided some stuff for you, but it's so much. So if there's a lot to share, don't even worry about it. But you can see here that I filed, an affidavit of moral character, because I did not want her intervening anymore. I had provided the court pictures of her burning my child. I had reported her for assaulting me. I had let the court know that she was very abusive. And on top of that, she was living in another state because she was married to a 4th person for years. And so now all of a sudden she wants to pop up and try to take my kids. Well, guess what? They granted her, despite what I said, they granted her. And at this time I had another judge, right? I had the fourth judge. So the third judge of the juvenile court, because that second judge, or that initial judge, his name was Judge Flanagan. I heard he's deceased now. When he accepted my motion for recusal, he handpicked the next judge who would come in, and that was Judge Amanda Heath. The first Black judge, one of these token Black people. And, I'm not saying this to be racist at all, but as a Black person, or, I'm multiracial, my grandmother was white, my mom's mom. But as a person of color, these people like her really offend me, because they are put on this pedestal and they do all the wrong things that really just drop them so low. And they make people like me, who really work hard, who really are are full of integrity, look bad to the general public. So I really just had in my mind all the way around board that she was just doing anything for this guy, because as you can see, and you're looking here, let me find here the court orders that you have, or the documents that you have. So what she ended up doing was coming through and allowing, let me see, the parties shall have joint physical custody. So number 13 is where you see that. And then you'll see, the motion for recusal. You'll see here harassing phone calls. So I'm even showing that my ex-husband has been abusing me. You will see then the final orders and things like that I be granted, like that I no longer even have like custody. She ended up, it's just a lot. I mean, I think you can in so many ways just scroll through that because I should have never had to go through that. Yeah. For everything that I have done for my children, as hard as I have worked, you see all these? Obviously, I'm not mentally ill. Obviously, I'm stable. I am not harassing phone calls, and a police officer actually helped me do that. And let me tell you what happened with that. A police officer helped me get all these messages together that my ex-husband was sending me. I guess maybe when he was high, tweaking, whatever the case may be. A police officer helped me get all this stuff together. And then I went over to the criminal court to press charges on him. We finally had something to be able to press charges on him because they were ignoring the rape and all this stuff. Got over there, and the judge said, "Oh, you're in civil court right now. And since you're in civil court, I don't want to tie up two courts. So I'm just going to dismiss this case." And the civil court never even addressed it. Now, we have in our minds that when we are going through all these things like this, when the other parent is doing all this stuff, they automatically lose custody. Yeah. There's no question about who the children are better with, none of that. But when it came to me, none of this stuff mattered at all. And then not only had I already had custody, once I got custody, Amanda Heath came in. While Judge Flanagan was making all these changes, my children were living at the house where his mom lives. So my ex-husband was living in his mom's house. He had always been living in his mom's house for so long. But he had gotten into his own place, got evicted because he wasn't, for whatever reason, he was evicted. He was living in this place for 6 months, got evicted, went back to his mom's house with my kids, couldn't pass a drug test. The judge evicted him out of his mother's house because he couldn't pass a drug test. Now, even that may be an overstep for a judge. So there's a whole lot of just personal stuff. If you go through all this, you can see that. So anyway, he got evicted out of his mom's house. Well, at this point in time, his mom has no permission of mine to have children. I don't want my children there. Obviously, if I wanted my children with somebody else, I wouldn't be in court as the plaintiff or the appellant on every single case. It's me fighting, and they're not helping me at all. And I'm the only person who's doing anything that I'm supposed to do. So anyway, they evicted him out of his mom's house, and my children were there for 3 months, for 3 whole months without a parent or guardian. He and I were the only parents. First of all, we are the only parents, and we had joint custody at this time. Well, if my kids are with him and you evict him out of where he is, and he has my kids, who are my kids living with? So this was the case there. They wouldn't even let me go get my children or anything like that. And then came into court again. I'm sitting here wondering, like, why can't I get my kids? Came back into court again. And I believe in April, came back to court in April 2019. I'm looking at the case. And at this point, obviously, I'm like super mad. I go into this court, Amanda Heath is there. And I'm just like, I hate y'all. Like, I hate y'all. And that's it. You know, I hate you. I was raped by a foster parent. Like, this has been a whole this has been a living hell. You know, and then she just, you know, was very nasty. She said, you know, started making these remarks. Do you know where you are? And I had a third attorney at this point. I had to fire her because she took my visitation away from my kids. And I said, well, why did you do that? And she said, because the judge called me on my cell phone and asked me all these questions and I didn't have your file. So I just told him this. I was like, okay, well, you just took my visitation away from my kids. Like, we were going to family counseling and everything. And you just stripped me of that. You're supposed to be representing me. So I fired her, saw her in the courthouse one day while I was getting all this stuff together to go back to court. And she said, it's because we don't want to be bullied. This is what she told me. So even the attorneys that I had did not help me. But yeah, I came back to court, you know, told this judge I hated them, that, you know, I've been raped by a foster parent and they didn't do anything. And this has just not been a good experience for me at all. And she said, you know, stuff. She was just talking. Do you know where you are? What did she say? Do you know where you are? Who's in your network? And get out of my courtroom. After she took custody from me, so in this hearing, she took custody from me and gave custody to my ex-husband's mother. And I did not realize that was a violation of my rights. And so if you want to pull up the document that I shared with you and just scroll way to the bottom, I added a table of cited authorities that I use in my appeal. Because it is against the law for them to do something like that. In fact, custody disputes between a parent and a third party have to, in order for that to even happen. So it says, in every case involving a custody dispute between a parent and a third party, the trial court must first make a determination as to whether the parent has lost his or her right pursuant to Georgia Code 974 or is unfit pursuant to Georgia case law. There are the appeals that I have listed there. And then when that only happens, it says here, probate court was without legal authority to make any determination under OCG or under Georgia Code 974 regarding the mother's loss of legal custody of her child in favor of a third party. So there's this Brown versus King Georgia Appeals Court where, first of all, in order for a third party to even step in, there has to be a discussion about custody. Well, there was no discussion about custody because we already had custody. I already had custody. The dad and I had joint custody. So what I'm trying to do now is have physical custody, but I mean, that shouldn't be an issue when he's homeless, technically, and homeless because of the court. So he doesn't even have a place to live. So yeah, my kids come with me, right? So that's the way that's supposed to be. And when it comes to a third party coming in, when a third party steps in, so if I didn't have custody, custody was still an issue. When a third party steps in, they have to actually prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the parent is unfit. So a judge cannot make a direct comparison between a parent and a third party and try to say, oh, well, we think this third party is, you know, better for your child than the parent. That is against the law. Nobody told me that. I've learned that, you know, for the last 5 years, I haven't seen my children. So since 2019, the judge not only took Judge Heath not only took custody from me, she made it illegal for me to call my children. So she took custody from me. She put in the court order that I could not contact my children and that the only way that I could talk to my children is if my children contacted me first. Okay. So I'm thinking in my mind all this time that I can't even see my child or talk to my children. And I didn't hear from them. My oldest daughter graduated in 2023 or 2023. She graduated from high school in 2023 on her birthday. an honor student, right? Just like her mom, earned a full ride scholarship to Vanderbilt University. I'm her only parent with a college education. Not only did she get this full ride scholarship, she was working with a nonprofit organization that is an educational consulting company because she needed help living with somebody who doesn't know the first thing about going to college. While at the same time, as I mentioned, I work with students, I had an educational consulting company I started myself. I started an educational consulting company because I love education. And so I help people get into college. And that in and of itself was just horrible. Like, right. So I am in a national organization. I was a member of a national organization. Vanderbilt is highly competitive. Of like 40,000 students who apply to that school, only about 1,500, 1,700 get in. My child got in and on a full ride. And so here now, being a part of this national organization, naturally, I'm going to look real crazy. Or that whole situation just looks real crazy because my child didn't even work with me to get there. And they did all this stuff to me just to make me look bad. And so my child, reached out to me. My oldest daughter reached out to me after she turned 18, just a few days later, and reached out to me on LinkedIn. And basically was just like going off on me. She specifically said, I thought you cared about my well-being and all this stuff. And I am just like, what are you talking about? And so the connection to all of this is that this is what is happening to foster children. This is what is happening, trafficking. I reported trafficking. I reported being I didn't even know pimped, right, is what it was, but I didn't know what that was. I lived like, again, a very sheltered life, but now we know it's trafficking, and I reported that several times. Police reports, I reported that. For you, that police report is going to be number 7, if you want to show that. I reported that to the police after I turned 18 in 2007. I reported it again in 2010. And they never helped me. And now it's to this point where I can't even press charges against that person because it happened like in 2002 when I was living in her foster home, right? And then on top of that, they were hiding it for so long that they weren't going to report that. But now, as you look, and this is what he wrote, but that is an actual police report. So they were very much aware of that. So now I'm flagged, right? They already had trouble with me. But now, wow, now she's saying she's raped. So the tactics in the foster care system are these things. So mentally ill, all these different things, this is quite normal. So however they can try to make it look bad. And then now we look today and there's a human trafficking task force. There's extra money, as Sylvia spoke to help kids who are trafficked and all this stuff. But for so long, they would be the ones to tell you that was never even happening. Mm-hmm. And my children technically were trafficked. This just giving my kids to someone else, just overstepping my rights, my constitutional rights. I think I know I actually posted in here too for, parents who are listening and things like that. Let me see here. House Bill, I would have to, House Bill 1178. So this is actually the Parents' Bill of Rights. In the state of Georgia, we have a Georgia Parents' Bill of Rights, and you can look that up. It's Georgia Code 22786, but it's also a federal thing. Parents have rights. Somebody cannot just overstep. And so just now that you kind of have like a whole, just nasty, overview of what happened. After my oldest daughter, Jada, her name is Jada, after she reached out to me, I immediately filed court again, right? Because first of all, it's not true that I don't care about my child. And brainwash whatever people have done and said to my child, that's just not true. And as I had to speak to them, so I was able to see both of them in this past July. I saw Jada, so Jada reached out to me. We went out for her birthday, and then I was able to see her and my youngest daughter in July. I took them both out, and I explained. I told them all of this, and Another issue is that when you're going through stuff like this in the court is telling you not to tell your kids. But you know what? The biggest mistake that we can make is not telling our children what's going on. Because when we don't tell our children what's going on, somebody else is telling them anything. And that goes for everything. If we're not teaching our kids, somebody else is. And so I apologize to them for that. I explained all of this to them. I let them know, that I was raped in the foster care system, that I had been going through like all of this stuff and everything, and that I hope to press charges. So after Jada had reached out to me, I immediately went back to court. I hired another attorney. So my fourth attorney, they ended up quitting. I wasn't going to fire another one, but they ended up quitting. I was just going to let them quit. But I wasn't going to fire another one. I'm tired of it. But I went back to court again, represented myself pro se, and tried to change the order from my children. So one of the things I want you to see here, and one of the things I want to point out, is the court order that was given to the paternal grandmother. It really looked like slave papers, if you ask me. So it is so number 12 on your list. So if you look at number 12, the judge is writing here, the standard for a change in custody is the best interest of the child. This court finds that there has been a major change in circumstances with the mother. The children informed the court that the morning of this hearing, there was a loud knock on the door, and they were fearful that it was law enforcement, again, because of the mother's continued use of law enforcement to intimidate them. So first of all, I didn't even know anything about this until I received this court order at least a couple of weeks after we went to court. As you know, that's illegal, that's illegal, right? So I should have the right to respond to that. I didn't even know anything about that. So they just wrote that day. Like, I didn't even know that. Second of all, I was calling the police to go over to the paternal grandmother's house for welfare checks. Because again, as I mentioned, my children were living there without a parent or guardian. So I'm like, how are my kids doing? And a police officer said, well, we'll do welfare checks. Like, we'll go and check. And so that's what was happening. Apparently somebody knocked on their door that day and their kids freaked out thinking it was the cops. But I didn't know anything about that. So that was a whole thing there. But it's showing here that I show favoritism to my daughters, that I was calling one child white trash, one child trashy girl, all this stuff. And then it even goes into and describes my children. So this child is a sporty child. This child is a quiet child. And if you are familiar with slavery and what slave papers look like, that's exactly what this was. And it gave a third party, a white woman at that. So this is an interracial relationship. It gave this person ownership over my children. And I had custody of my kids. Nothing was ever proven that I was unfit. And the law shows that. So I wanted to go back to court to change that first and foremost. And I told my daughters that too. I was like, I totally don't appreciate this court having y'all walk around with a paper that says your dad's a crackhead or a drug addict and your mom doesn't want you. That is definitely not in the best interest of my children. That doesn't respect them. That doesn't protect their privacy, which is another issue in the foster care system. And then the paternal grandmother is walking around with this saying, oh, these are my kids now, and has no shame that it's her son who's a drug addict, has no shame that my child is being called out, whether I said it or not, and I didn't because my kids are not white. But if I said that my kids were white trash or not, why would you want to walk around with something like that and keep showing people something like that about my children? About even children that you claim that you love, and that's why you're there. That is so disrespectful. So I mean, all of this really just goes on and on and on. And if you scroll down to 19, I want you to see here. After Jada reached out to me, went back to court, filed a petition to do a modification of custody so that I can get Lauren. Because obviously Jada was raised to take care of her sister and to focus on school. Now she's in Tennessee going to school. She's done well. That means Lauren is by herself. So I went back to court, filed again. Over the years, working on my doctorate degree and all this stuff, I've learned some other stuff. So I knew about a motion for recusal. a motion for reconsideration. And as much as I don't like Amanda Heath, because of my experience before, I decided that I was going to file a motion for recusal. And this is where my blessing came in. And I know that God was with me through all of this. So I filed this motion for recusal because, again, she tried to deny me from having custody of my children. And when I went into court, again, I went into court with the mindset of a foster child who has to be perfect with all my ducks in a row. The paternal grandmother, the dad came in. Dad still didn't come in with a drug test. Paternal grandmother didn't come with a drug test. Neither one of them had ever taken a divorce and parenting class. So technically, years back, my ex-husband should have never had my kids anyway, because he never met the requirements of the court. And the divorce and parenting class is mandated for us. So, and then, co-parenting, paternal, nothing. No income affidavit. They came in completely empty-handed. I had all my stuff together. The judge still tried to give me pushback. So I filed a motion for recusal, asking her, hey, not a motion for recusal. I'm sorry, I keep saying that. I filed a motion for reconsideration, asking her to rethink that. What you just saw here was her response to my motion for reconsideration, where she cited Buffington versus Gold, a Georgia appeals court that is a Georgia appeals case about brain, okay? A product. And from 1986, she said, based on this case, I don't have to accept your motion for reconsideration. This case has nothing to do with human beings. What it does have everything to do is the cell of brain, okay? I think it's called like gum brain. I wrote it down. Let me see exactly what it's called here, the exact name of that. At any rate, I actually went and looked that up, and I know we're short on time, so I'll just let that be. But yeah, you can see right there in the case, she cited it, looked that case up. You can Google it. It's about brain. So it's like, here again, my children are being labeled as if they were nothing but products, nothing but slaves. I personally take offense to that. It was just very unfortunate. Sorry, somebody's about to say something.
Do you think, but do you think that she did that purposely? I mean, we've heard these stories quite a bit where family court, the judge doesn't seem to be there to get the right verdict. They already have their minds made up from the get-go. So it seems to me that that's almost like a slap on the face. That's like, yeah, guess what? Your kids are products. Like, that's the way I would interpret that. Yeah.
That's exactly how I feel. And that is why this whole connection, this is all about trafficking. And I will tell you that very first judge that I went to, his name was Daniel Craig. This is like his last year, because actually his replacement judge, who had actually run the election, he was an attorney. He still is until he, steps in as the judge. He's the one who actually told me I could file an appeal. And he said, I reached out to the NAACP and I said, hey, I think my civil rights have been violated. And I got connected to this person who said you can file an appeal. I wrote that by myself. I really wanted to show the appeal. I have to go through and like block out names and stuff like that. And it was docketed April 1st. So I'm still waiting to hear back. But constitutionally, I'm supposed to have an answer by November 1st. So just in 2 days. So as you can see, still waiting up until the last very minute. And maybe they're saving the best for last, because I've heard that my appeal is really good. I've spoken to attorneys. They're like, this is super advanced and it is super packed, because when you file an appeal, you can't attach new information. But when I did this motion for reconsideration, I cited all these laws, federal, state. I also attached all of those court orders. So what you've been scrolling through is only a snippet. My document that went to the Court of Appeal was like, 133 pages, just court records. It is absolutely egregious what I have had to go through in the court. Nobody has that much document, that much court paperwork. And it shocked them, I believe, that I even still kept it. So I'm supposed to be this problematic person. But ironically enough, clearly I'm organized. And then, my independent living coordinator, the person who I had problems with, she told me one thing before that stuck in my head always, and that was keep a paper trail. And the reason why she told me that is because what Sylvia said, we have so much turnaround Some caseworkers, they don't care. They're not keeping our paperwork, nothing. I kept a paper trail. So all of my documents, I attached all of that stuff to that motion for reconsideration. And when I did that, it became a part of the whole court record. So now everything since that I have been telling you since day one has been sent over to the Georgia Court of Appeals. And had I not done that, I mean, the Court of Appeals would see that, hey, the appellees came in with nothing, right? Just bare bones. But they wouldn't have any real context into what was happening because the court hasn't been trying to provide that. So I provided that for them. And just so you know, those appellees never even responded. They don't have to. My youngest daughter read the appeal, and my oldest daughter said, yeah, well, Nana, that's who they call my ex-husband's mom, says she didn't respond because she doesn't have to. And no, she doesn't have to. But when I look through other Georgia Court of Appeal opinions, when they don't reply, I get the favor. I could have submitted a motion for summary judgment, but I heard you talking a couple of weeks ago and you said we have to set the record straight, right? I chose not to do that because they had an opportunity to speak and reply. And we're talking about sexual abuse. All this stuff is in there. Everything I told you today is in that appeal. They had an opportunity to respond and they didn't because it wasn't important enough for them. If I filed a motion for summary judgment, that gives them a second chance to respond, and they don't need to have that second chance, number one. Number two, it gives them favor because the court will then say whoever is the non-movement, which would be them, would get favor in the court. And then number three, I want an answer. My daughters and I, and every parent, and every foster child, anybody who's gone through this, deserve an answer for everything that happened to me. And now this is going to become law. So if they come back and deny me, or try to say, they would essentially be changing the law if they came back and said I was wrong about anything. And I have outlined everything, even saying, well, the judge in the first place was wrong because my grandmother wasn't there, because you didn't talk to a doctor, because you didn't do this and this and this. So from day one, all of that was wrong. And I intentionally did not file that motion for summary judgment, asking them to just give me a win because I want the opinion. I want a response. I want an answer. I want them to speak to everything they did to me, and I want them to know about it. I want them to know everything that happened to me. I believe they even have a copy of the police report. And I'm talking about being trafficked. And I know we're right at time. If you scroll to on your list, down here on your list, you have, oh, it's way at the bottom. Wait a minute, I have a number. So yeah, scroll to the bottom, you'll see a picture of the judge there. I took this screenshot because everything could be changed on the internet very quickly, right? So that's Amanda Heath right there. If you scroll down, I read her bio. I wanted to know who was this person that would spit in my face like this. So first of all, don't ever think that because somebody is the same race as you, that they're going to treat you any better than somebody who isn't. So that's just, and I learned that just being in a multiracial family. But yeah, case in point. But if you keep scrolling down a little bit, you'll see that I highlighted something on this bio. And what I highlighted on this bio was her goal was to hold children accountable for their actions, not to hold them hostage. That statement really stood out to me because I felt like my children were used as weapons against me and held hostage from me because I reported being a victim of sex trafficking, because I reported being sold by a foster parent and she didn't want anything to do with it. And so lo and behold, a statement like that would actually be listed here. I don't know who would even use hostage in the same sentence with children. I don't even get that.
Good point.
Who would say that? Like, that is ridiculous. And then when you're saying to hold children accountable for their actions, yes, there might be some bad children out there, but where are the parents at?
But doesn't it go without saying that she says her goal was to hold children, her goal was to hold children accountable for their actions.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the judge's responsibility to hold, that's the parents.
Mm-hmm.
That's ridiculous. I don't even understand.
Look at this. All right, look at this again. took that
Her goal
screenshot and saved
was to
it.
hold children accountable for their actions, not to hold
That's
them
it.
hostage.
Not to hold
I
them
mean,
hostage. Why
that
would
is the
somebody think you're
strangest
holding kids
statement.
hostage?
And that was this woman right here.
That was her. That was the last judge on the case. Yeah. So I just
That's
appealed in the Georgia Court of Appeal against her. And she has been, just not kind to me at all. And she signed that court order calling my children white trash. So again, I never said that about my children. And I don't want anybody else saying that about my children. But here's somebody, this person right here said that about my children. This person right here allowed that to be placed in a court order for a third party to walk around with as her proof of having my children. And yet, here, I guess she's helping when she says her goal was to hold children accountable for their actions, not hold them hostage. What did my children ever do to deserve that?
exactly. I do not understand that statement. That makes no sense on so many different levels. I can't even believe she would say something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Everybody already knows that. We already know. It's look, it wasn't like your kids were on trial for, I don't know, kleptomania, or like they were kleptomaniacs, like they were robbing stores or something. Your kids had nothing to do with this. They were in the middle of a custody battle. And yet their father's a meth head.
That's
and
right.
abusive. And
That's right.
by any other standard, CPS, if there was a time and a space for some CPS to come in and rescue children from a bad situation, let's just say, Lakievia, you weren't even part of their life, and he was their dad. That would be a situation they would rush in and say, "Oh, we've got him. We can get kids out of this home." And people would be like, "Okay, yeah, he was a meth head. They should be out of that home. He was abusive." But where are they now? Like they. Just like you said, they should be with you in your care, and he should be getting help. Somebody should be getting this guy help. And this is not new either. We have seen this time and time again where they split the parents and they give them to the abuser. And Sylvia, you know that part better than I do. I never understand that. Why? I mean, it's money. I get it, but
I think it's the inverted system that we have. But not only that, not to cut you off, Gino, but she literally cut off communication. So she was cutting that bond completely.
And that's illegal. That's illegal too. So technically, I still have my parental rights for all the audience. I still have my parental rights. And I just have to interject here, Sylvia, because having my parental rights, I have say in all of this, first of all. Second of all, it is state law that there should be a parenting plan in place. Period. So that whole thing where you can't even talk to your kids unless they call you, that's what they call a de facto. Going through this process, I fell in love with reading court opinions. I'm working on a doctorate degree in strategic leadership right now. And so, learning about that, I've been studying Kings. I like that kind of stuff. So totally have fallen in love with that. That's called a de facto parental rights termination, looked down upon. There has to be a parenting plan in place. It's illegal not to have one. So a parenting plan to rekindle that rekindle that relationship. So like you're saying, Sylvia, that was illegal. Yeah. All of this stuff. Mm-hmm.
So many cases illegal.
I want to frame that quote. That is the.
Well, that's why I took a screenshot, because I saw it and I said.
Go ahead. There's two things that have, in my time in doing this, have stunned me. One, we had oh my gosh, help me out, Sylvie. Rachel Bruno. We had Rachel Bruno on. This is right in the beginning when I first got started with this, and she talks about she was talking about her case and all this stuff, and then she said her lawyer told her something legal, and she's like, "Well, that's against my constitutional right," and he's like, "Oh, they don't abide by the Constitution here." And I was just my jaw hit the floor. I'm like, what? And that was my first taste of family court. Then, now this quote, I could put those side by side. Those were jaw-dropping moments for me. That's ridiculous. I don't understand I'm still trying to figure out what did she mean by that? Why would you even make a statement like that unless you're just trying to mock people or something?
That's
And
what.
if somebody else wrote it, you should watch what is posted about you online. Things can change so quickly. That's why I took a screenshot. I thought to myself, I'm just gonna say this. Now I listen to my intuition even more now, which is good because I know God is telling me what to do and guiding my steps. So yeah, I'm just gonna clip this because I'm gonna run this through the mud. I'm gonna talk about this forever and a day. And the moment I say something about it, someone's gonna go online and they're gonna change the words around, and I can't do anything about it. And it's just that easy. But now
Yeah.
I've saved it. And
Right.
just for this reason, and that's how I know God is with me, because to your point, I'm glad you agree, because that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard or read, from someone who's supposed to be, so honorable. Like, and in the context of all this other stuff, my kids are white trash, trashy children and rice, right? Grain, sorry, we're gonna compare them to grain and say because they're selling grain and don't have to do XYZ, I don't have to either. My children are not grain. They're not a product to be sold. They're not a product to just no children is or no children are, but this is the mentality. And this is all of this is what leads up to trafficking in the foster care system. So you see what I've gone through. Most children, most people like me, like you said earlier, Gino, my attitude. And do I think that she wanted to do that? Yes, I think she intentionally did that. Okay, so that's the answer to that question. But yeah, most people who went through what I went through are not doing what I'm doing right now. They're probably in jail. They're probably on drugs. They're probably, trafficking, like they're probably prostituting voluntarily or being trafficked. But this causes that. My children, what they went through, this is what breaks us. This psychological abuse starts on day one. We are targeted. We are groomed. We are made to feel that we are nothing more than a sack of grain. We are made to feel that we're nothing more than white trash. We are made to feel that what we think, what we say, what we feel doesn't even matter. I am not surprised this happened to my children, but I'm not, but I can't say that I thought it would, right? Oh, sorghum brain is what it's called. I actually put in my notes. I have all these notes. It's a member of the grass family, right? So it's something maybe you would feed goats. Okay.
Wow.
These are my children. And on top of everything I just said, only 3 to 5% of children who were in the foster care system, adults who age out or foster care alumni, even have a 4-year college degree. I earned my college degree really with all of this going on, them not helping me, them trying to make me look bad, them depriving my children. And not only do I have a bachelor's degree, I have a master's degree, and I'm almost done with the doctorate degree. And when I can't even find any data that shows how many foster care alumni have master's degrees because the number is so little. So clearly the system failed me on purpose. But as you can see, that's a long purpose right there, right?
Yeah.
Or it was intentional. It looks more malicious. It looks more intentional. And it definitely makes the foster care system look bad, because if I have all this going on in my life, why wouldn't you want me to speak? Why wouldn't you want my children to be with me?
Yeah.
Why would you leave them with somebody who is uneducated and around drugs? Why would you leave my children in that? And then you try to make people think it's me. You have my children walking around, a third party walking around with something saying that I called my children names like that. I did not. To make people believe that I'm this monster and horrible person. And then where did you drop the ball to make me someone better? I was in the foster care system for 5 years. Please don't say you taught me, because clearly you didn't. And don't say I can't learn, because if I couldn't, all this wouldn't be up here. And that's Jada. Is this one over here? Is Jada? Jada made a perfect score on the GMAT, the state test, a perfect 100. So the Duke Talent Identification Program reached out to her and said, "Hey, we want her to go to college, or we want her to take the SAT or ACT." My daughter naturally came to me and said, "Mom, I want to take the SAT." She took the SAT at 14 years old. At 13, she was invited. She took the test right after her birthday. and scored high enough to go to college. She went to Appalachian State University and took law school, took a law class, an intro to law class at 14 years old. I paid for that.
Wow.
And you're going to tell people that I'm not taking care of my children? And then see for yourself.
They literally write stuff in the documents. That's what I'm saying when you read these charts and you read these stories and you think it's true, but then you start finding out that it's not true. They literally make them up.
This is absolutely ridiculous. And so, as I mentioned before, isolation is thing. One of the things that I really do feel helped me was I had to come over feeling shame, right? I felt shame for so long after a foster parent raped me. I'm not a prostitute. I told her. I felt so embarrassed by that. Even being in the foster care system, it's just embarrassing. My mom, she had AIDS. Like that it's just embarrassing. And so were they helping me to get over that? No, I had to get over that. And I'm still struggling with it, but I had to be brave and talk to people like you. I had to tell my story. I had to go out there. I had to talk to my teachers. I had to show my face and let people see who I am and let people get to know who I am. Because if I was not able to do that, for example, I wouldn't have even met Sylvia. I write on Facebook every day. As I said, I'm a writer. I'm like a freedom writer. I write all the time, just like they do. And I asked Sylvia, how did you find me? She said, somebody pointed me to your page. I don't even know people are watching me, but I do this because it's healing for me. It helps me and it's fun. I love it. I've gotten so much better at speaking, all the things just from writing. But it also has helped me to meet more people. It also has given me courage to step out there and talk to people. And in doing that, I am, in a sense, defending myself, because if you don't know who I am, you're going to believe any of this stuff that's written. But when you know me, you're going to look at this and say, white trash. Like, really? Lakievia calls somebody white trash? Oh, wait, and her kids at that? Lakievia is Black. You probably are going to think that. So are her kids Black too? Like, oh, yeah. Well, no, they're biracial. But I mean, truly, if you're only seeing half of the story, why would you call her kids white? That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But that's always something that they can use against us if we don't speak up.
Yep. So, yeah. And actually, y'all should go follow Lakievia. She does write some amazing things, and she was going off on the court and about her being trafficked on Facebook, and somebody tagged me, so that's how I met Lakievia. But you really do need to go and look up her Facebook page, and she puts it public. I mean, she's just going off, like do it, girl.
Thank you. And I really appreciate what you all are doing, because it takes a lot of courage to stand up, especially with the kind of retaliation that we deal with just for speaking out. Yes. As you can see, my children were taken. Yeah, it's all kinds of stuff. My benefits, my children, you name it. Like, I have nothing other than what I've earned myself. So, oh, that's so sweet. That's me. That's actually in Vegas. I went there with my company. I work for the Institute for Functional Medicine, and I really love being there. I'm even sure I probably shouldn't have said that. I don't know. But I love what they do, because we talk about whole health, right? So we train people. They, I have to say, have nothing to do with any of this. Are not sponsoring me to be here or anything like that. But it is really important for me. It has been so just healing for me to be around medical providers and healthcare providers who really care about the whole person, who care about our mental health, who care about our spirituality, who care about the connections that we have, and who have taught me to prioritize those things in my life as well. So, God has been with me. I've been very, very blessed. And I'm just really thankful that you all are stepping up to support people like me and to let us share this story and to listen and, to just be someone brave to stand with us. Because even just having somebody there when we're trying to do something scary gives us strength. So thank you, Gina. Thank you, Sylvia.
You are very welcome. No, Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. We appreciate it. I think we need to like examine the whole spectrum of this. Um, I don't want to pigeonhole things or get in one lane. Like we need to cover the broader spectrum so people understand what's actually going on, from family court to group homes, adoption, foster care, even in the churches. That's something I'm going to be exploring. I think going into churches fostering children and they're being funded to do it. Like there's a lot of really sick stuff going on. So it's nice to see every angle so you get the full picture. Because I don't like just like you said, I mean, there's one side, you're telling your side of the story, right, with the white trash thing, which is kind of funny. And there's yet, wait a minute, I have biracial kids. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, it's just stupid stuff. But we appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. Guys, if you're out there and you're a social worker, I'm talking to social workers, if you're in the system right now, or you were in the system, and you would like to share some of your own stories and some of the things you've witnessed that weren't on the up and up, we would love to have you on. We really need whistleblowers like Sylvia was to come forward and share your stories. You don't have to go on camera. To be honest, if you don't want to come on the show, we understand. I definitely get it. But if you would like to talk to us behind the scenes, you're more than welcome to do that. You can reach out to Sylvia or Danielle at rescuethefosters.org. You can see both of their, you can DM them or email them right there from the website. Because we really need that inside information. We need people to come forward and be brave, and because we know there's people with hearts out there, right, Sylvia? There's people like you that actually care about children and care about families, and that's what we're in business to do: to reunify families, to help families through tragic and horrific events in their lives, to bring healing. That's ultimately what Rescue the Fosters is going to be doing. So, Sylvia, any last words?
Well, I just want to mention one last thing, and I do know that Lakievia and I will be working on some stuff because we've already made some connections just talking, and we're like, oh my God. So I know we're going to be working with each other, but I also want to say something that we kind of glossed over, and I don't want it being glossed over, is that Lakievia reported the foster parents trafficking her, and they are still running. Nothing was done. Okay. So what does that tell you? That they are most likely still trafficking. So that's an issue right there that needs to be resolved. But I don't want to leave it on a bad note, but we can't just gloss over these things
No, that's important. Yeah,
that
that's
she was
important to know.
trafficked.
Yeah, those
Mm-hmm.
people are probably still receiving funds from the state, from Title IV funding, and then using it to foster other children. And I pray that nothing is happening to those children. But yeah, that's. I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's what this show's about, to expose that this is evil. Like they'll take a loving parent's kid out of their home. Everything's going wonderful, and all of a sudden they show up at your door and they take them. And yet someone like that is still receiving federal dollars to supposedly take care of children. It's sick. It's a
So
disgusting, sick system.
Before we go, if you want to go to number 6 in the list that I gave you, what you'll see there, I'm not sure if this foster parent still has a foster home, but it does appear that she may be trying to have one. Because if you look at 6, I actually had a caseworker reach out to me, and that's the picture of the email that she sent, just a screenshot, asking me for the police report because this foster parent was under investigation. So I haven't heard back from this caseworker. In fact, when I talked to the investigator in my city in Richmond County, the lead investigator for sex crimes in August, he told me that this caseworker was now in Atlanta. And as you can see, that was in February when she reached out to me. So I totally have been making noise because I don't want children there. And that's what I should be doing. So
The only thing that, I don't know, when I see a CPS investigation, it's just like when police investigate themselves, they have internal affairs. Like there needs to be a excuse me, a broader oversight. Like there needs to be another authority watching over these people, not within their own organization. So I pray that they do the right thing and they've pulled funding from them and these people are prosecuted. I'm not very hopeful just from our experiences with this stuff, but I pray that that's actually happened. So yeah, but thank you for sharing. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us over in Rumble, Pilled. I don't know if anybody was over at YouTube, but if you were, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Good to see all you guys. And I'll be back tomorrow night with Insight Live. Me and Matt are going to be doing something. I don't know what. We'll be talking about something, but join us tomorrow. That's 8 p.m. right